Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 46. So this week I am tackling the third volume of Doctor Aphra. So this is in the first run still, and this arc is called Remastered. It's issues number 14 to 19, so it's 6 issues, and it's quite a lot to go through on this one. There's loads of different species, there's a lot of storyline, and any of you Patreons may have been able to see that the artwork's amazing, but also the writing and the notes that I've had to do for this is quite extensive. I just want to do a quick shout out for the Star Wars Timeline show. Now, if you go onto YouTube, type in Star Wars Timeline and then filter it by channel, you'll find it by a gentleman named Ben. He's an absolute really cool guy, and he has got every Canon and Legends Star Wars book, which is basically mental, and he talks about Legends and Canon stuff, books and all sorts of other things. So I just want to give him a shout out because he's just a really cool guy, and we've been chatting recently, so that's Star Wars Timeline, but for ease I've included a link to that in the description. So let's get on with it. The writers for this arc is Kieron Gillen and Simon Spurrier. Now, this is the last Aphra comic that Kieron Gillen writes for, and then the next arc is taken over fully by Simon Spurrier. The artist is Emilio Laiso, and the colour artist is Rachelle Rosenberg. Issue number 14 was released in November 2017, issue number 19 was released in April 2018, and the trade paperback collection was released in July 2018. Now, I would lightly recommend people go back and check out episode 42 of Star Wars Comics in Canon for the second volume of Aphra, and episode 34 for the first volume of Aphra, and then episode 36 if you want to hear the Screaming Citadel crossover with Aphra and the main Star Wars gang. But this whole story is quite self-contained, so if you haven't listened to the other Doctor Aphra, or even ever really heard of anything else to do with Doctor Aphra, that is okay, because there's so much stuff in here. Aphra is actually, for once, not the most mental thing that's going on in this, so it's just great. So here's the crawl. It is a time of instability in the galaxy, as rebel forces fight the Galactic Empire, but on the fringes of the galaxy, the criminal underworld continues unabated in its pursuit of profits. Rogue archaeologist and scoundrel Dr. Aphra has recently parted ways with the malevolently inclined droids 000 and BT-1, resulting in her barely escaping the wrath of Sith Lord Darth Vader after yet another scheme went awry. Meanwhile, Imperial officer Magna Tolvan is dealing with the ramifications of her previous encounter with the infamous archaeologist, and it seems fate is tempted to repeat itself. And just for clarity, this is set once again between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. For anyone who's unaware, this whole Aphra run is going to be set between those two times. The second Doctor Aphra run, which I'll be tackling once I finish this one at some point, that will be set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But let's get on with the story. So issue 14 starts with Tolvan on a planet called Samilk after she was demoted, which happened in the previous comics. And for clarity, I can't find Samilk anywhere else in the canon. Tolvan goes outside and then reminisces about Thanoth, and then the base gets attacked by a drop pod. Now for clarity, Thanoth was actually in the episodes of Star Wars Comics in Canon at 17 and 29. He's basically an inspector who was inspecting Darth Vader in the first run of Darth Vader comics, which is when we were introduced to Doctor Aphra. He was like a mentor to her in some ways. It kind of alludes to across these comics, but I thought I'd just tell you from the start. Yeah, he was like a mentor to her. Out of this drop pod, this droid woman comes out with a chain gun, starts shooting loads of stormtroopers and things, and Tolvan spots Aphra, and then starts to shoot at her. For clarity, this droid woman, it's called Rexa Go, and it's basically just quite a large woman who's been basically cybernetically enhanced and changed so much she's basically a droid now. While the attack is all going on, Tolvan tries to give her superior some orders, realising then that she's actually the subordinate, so she can't really give orders, and then she tries to head to the ship to try and flank and shoot the intruders. So Tolvan enters the ship, and Aphra is already inside and prevents her from doing that. The two talk for a little while. It turns out that Aphra's actually quite lonely, but she finds Tolvan cute, and Tolvan says, "What, regardless of my deformities and things," and Aphra doesn't view them that way. For clarity, Tolvan has got cybernetics. Both of her arms, her neck, and sort of the back of her head are cybernetic. I can't find a reason as to why this is, but I would presume she's in some sort of accident at a young age, and that's why. But she obviously sees it as quite a negative thing. And in response to that, Aphra does say that Tolvan probably just has some stories to tell about her cybernetics and things. Then Aphra's team signals, and Aphra stuns Tolvan and then leaves her outside of the ship as they fly off. So the ship flies off with Aphra, Rexa Go and a few others, and Aphra was surprised that Rexa Go didn't actually kill everyone, and then Rexa detonates a bomb which kills everyone there except Tolvan. Aphra gets quite angry at that, basically saying that she thought the only reason they were there were to get some Clone Wars era data. Rexago says you knew as much as you needed to know, and then Aphra starts to complain and things. And as she's sort of complaining and whatnot, Rexago's like, well, do you want to raise a complaint with the Master? And she's like, yes, I will actually. And then it turns out that the new Master is 000, and that's where Comic 14 ends. So issue 15 starts with Tolvan being in some sort of cell, and she's told that because of her incompetence at Edu, Yavin, and SWCIC, she has received 3 demerits and therefore is sentenced to execution. Now, for clarity, Edu is actually the place from Rogue One, so she had some sort of charge there, and that's obviously when Galen Erso was killed, when the rebellion ordered the sort of bombing there, when the crew of Rogue One actually got there. So she was actually there in the canon, which is quite an interesting thing. And so while she's in that cell and things, she is kind of daydreaming, and she imagines that Aphra breaks in and saves her. And she actually doesn't know Aphra's name at this moment in time. She actually refers to her as Joystick Chevron, because in the cockpit in the last issue, when Tolvan asked what Aphra's name was, Aphra kind of looked around the cockpit, saw a joystick, and said, my name's Joystick Chevron. So at this moment in time, Tolvan thinks that Aphra is called Joystick. So while that's all happening, 000 is on Son Tool in the relaxation suite, torturing someone with some sort of horrendous drill, and he's telling Aphra over a holo communicator that he wants his memories of his first murder back, because he's been in existence for, at this point, some unknown amount of time, but it's been at least centuries, and he has had his memories taken away. For clarity, 000 being on Son Tool, that's where he was in the last Aphra arc. That's where he went there, and there was that Rhodian gangster that he was basically using to kill all of the rival gangs in the sort of area, and he could kind of, from the shadows, rule over it. Now that Rhodian doesn't appear to be there anymore, so we assume he was probably killed by 000. So Aphra is still on the ship with Rexago, and she's got this little creature with her, which is a Tuca. Now, a Tuca is basically a cat. It's a subspecies of a feline cat. They're called Tuca cats. Loth cats, which are seen in Star Wars Rebels, are a subspecies of them. Now, you do see, the first time you actually see a Tuca is in Clone Wars as a stuffed toy, and there's quite a few stuffed toy Tucas around, and they're also in Rebels, as I said, but they're also in Resistance and The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is the first time you see them in live action, but the animation style of them, they look almost the same as what they do in Rebels and Clone Wars. But yeah, they're basically just a little space cat, essentially. And yeah, they're called Tucas, Tooka. So Aphra's cloned a Tuca, and she's just kind of petting it and whatnot. And she's talking to 000 about how she's retrofitted some droids for 000 as he asked. 000 comments on leadership. And he basically says that he needs her to basically, she's got like a leader sort of quality in things, and then she can kind of be the heel for him. So when everything goes wrong, any of the crew that she has, she will get all of the blame and he won't. And it's quite a clever thing to do. So from here, Rexago, that droid lady, gives an org scanner to Aphra. It's basically just a scanner that scans people and tells you loads of information about them. And Rexo, when scanned, is a remote-controlled knuckle, is how it's described. It, as I said earlier, it's basically quite a large, strong, stocky woman, and she's basically got some sort of thing on her head, and has almost been hollowed out just so she's remote control, which is not an existence that I would want to live. And this next part is going to take a little while, because there's a really, really cool double-page spread, which I have taken a photo of. It's on Patreon at the moment, and it will be on social media around the time of me posting this as well. And it's a photo of the crew members that she can choose from. So just before you get to that exact part, she does actually get introduced to one other person. For clarity, what 000, or what Rexa tells Aphra 000 wants, because Rexago is like fully controlled by 000. What she tells Aphra is that she needs to choose the crew that she's taking with her to go on this job. The first person she meets is someone called Halio Boss. It's a Skakoan male. Now, Skakoans, you would recognise them, even though the name may not be familiar. Wat Tambor of the Techno Union is probably the most famous Skakoan, and you'd recognise him from, I would recognise him in Attack of the Clones, because when Dooku is on Geonosis after Obi-Wan sneaks in and sees that meeting of the banking clan and Nute Gunray and stuff, there's a guy who's in some sort of weird robot suit, and he's talking, and he has to twist this strange knob on his chest, and it goes, that thing. I remember it very vividly, sorry for the impression, and it's because Skakoans need suits to survive off their homeworld. Now, they are in the Clone Wars a fair amount because they are aligned with the Trade Federation. The Techno Union becomes a part of the Trade Federation, which becomes a part of the Separatists. And you actually do get to see Wat Tambor in episode 2 the most. He's in episode 3, I think, very slightly for a little bit. And a little fun thing I found out was they actually speak something called Skakoverbal, or is also known as Skakoform, which is basically an incredibly complex dialect, which is the closest comparison for it is binary. So it's like people speaking in binary. And that weird little twisty thing that I mentioned on his chest where it goes all weird, his voice, is because that's actually a translator, and they have to change the sort of frequency of the translator to be able to get it to speak in Galactic Basic. And the reason it goes all weird and stuff is because there are certain things they say which can't really be translated, which was pretty mental. Quite a lot of depth has gone into that. And in this comic as well, I'd really recommend people check it out because you actually get to see what a Skakoan looks like without their breather mask on. So now on to the group of characters which are in the crew. So we start with Glassed Ombra. It's a Defel. Now, a Defel is something that has appeared a little bit in Star Wars before. They look like wolf people, essentially. There's other wolf people in Star Wars to make it more confusing, but it's kind of like maybe a wolf or a jaguar or some sort of like big cat as a person, and they can actually bend light around themselves to make them almost invisible. They feature quite a bit in Legends. In Canon, there's not too much about them, but they have like a special thing about their fur that allows them to do this. And Aphra describes them as a passive-aggressive apex predator. The next person on the list is Tam Posler. They are a former Milvain cop, threw out the law book to go chase down an unhinged psycho, now well on his way to becoming one, doing mercenary work to fund the hunt. So it's basically just a human from Milvain who wears basically bounty hunter gear. And they are with someone called Cason Bog, which was a victim of the aforementioned unhinged psycho. Now, Cason Bog looks like basically a human male with a beer belly and no head at all. And where the neck is, there's sort of I don't know what to call it, almost looks like a plate that would go over where your neck is and then sort of shoulder guards and things, but this being can talk and is alive. It goes into details a little bit later in the comic, but essentially they were decraniated, meaning that they had their head removed, and they can still talk. I'm not 100% sure how. I think they have some sort of voice box basically in their sort of chest area. It's quite weird to look at, but interestingly about Tam Posler and Cason Bog is they are actually a couple, and they also feature in very, very, very briefly. I think you can see them both in Rogue One. I think they were meant to feature a little bit more, but they're in a scene that ended up getting deleted. I think you can actually see them in the teaser trailer, oddly enough, but you can see them somewhere. But yeah, basically someone in bounty hunter sort of gear where you can't really see any skin, and they're wearing a helmet and things, along with a white human male with a beer belly and no head. So quite odd. Next on the list is Dek Nil, which Aphra describes as one of those weird droids. It is a first generation droideka retooled with probability tech, and she tinkered with his existential circuits too. And the quote of what this droid says is, "The colours so beautiful, can you hear them? I can, yes, so soft, ooh, the music of the void, it calls." And Aphra comments that she might have overdone this. Now for clarity, the droidekas, you may remember them from the prequels and things, they're the basically droids that spin in balls and then they get up and then they have like a mini ray shield over them. I think they're one of the first things you actually see in Phantom Menace. Now this one doesn't really look like that. Obviously it says it's like a first generation droideka, and it's green and it's pink and it's weird. I'm not really going to read out many of the things that Dek Nil actually does in this because it's all very cryptic, and I'm going to leave that for the enjoyment of you guys who are actually reading along with me, because Dek Nil might be one of my favourite characters in this whole comic arc. But the problem is that none of it really makes sense if I read out the dialogue, if you can't fully see what it is. And a lot of the stuff, you read it out and it doesn't make any sense. But then, like, either an issue later or several pages later, something will happen and it will be basically what Dek Nil said. But you wouldn't have guessed that because it's so cryptic and weird. But it's basically a droid who has got, as I said, the probability tech. So the droid has got this bizarre way of almost getting out of anything. I'd almost describe it as, if anyone has seen Deadpool 2 or knows about the comics, the character Domino, who's incredibly lucky. It's kind of like that, where this being seems to just know when something incredibly improbable happens. So an example that happens later on is almost like they shoot a beam and it bounces off like 4 walls, catches something that falls off the ceiling at the perfect time, and then reflects into an angle and hits something that would have been basically impossible to hit under any other circumstance. So it's a droid that's almost got superpowers, and it's really, really interesting. But as I said, I don't really want to spoil that character, and trying to read it will not do it justice. But anyone who's reading along, Dek Nil is very cool, and try and read what they say. It's quite interesting, and obviously one of the things they say is they can like hear colours, and they can taste sound and things like that. Like the senses get really messed up and things, but it's very cool. The next one is someone called the Violet Ghost. They're a mysterious stranger making a name in swordcraft and incorruptible morals, and Aphra says, probably an undercover prince, some crap like that. It's just like a human wearing violet stuff. And the last one is Sister 6. Now, they were kicked out of the Isotoper death cult for giggling during prayers. If assassins had royalty, she would have killed it by now. And then Aphra notes, actually kind of hot. Now, for clarity, the Isotoper Death Cult, that is the cult that I mentioned in the previous episode of Star Wars Comics in Canon, I think it was 2 episodes ago, which was the Rogue One sequel comic arc, which is when the main gang, the trio as it were, Han, Luke and Leia, they head to Jeddah after everything happened in Rogue One. And that death cult is what is being mentioned here, the Isotoper Death Cult. And also for clarity, Sister 6 is a species called Exexto, Xexto. Now, the species can actually be seen in The Phantom Menace. It is a pod racer called Gazgano, and they're basically long and spindly. They have 6 limbs, so 4 arms and 2 legs, very tall, very stick thing. They look a little bit like Kaminoans from episode 2. And so that's a general roundup of all of the characters in this crew, and what 000 wants them to do is, because the ship can't lift off because it's too heavy, so Aphra has to make a decision of one of those crewmates to either kill or leave behind or whatever, just get them off the ship so the ship can take off and get the job done. And while Aphra is trying to figure out the decision of who to get rid of, Imperials start to surround the ship. So while this is all happening, Tolvan is against a wall in front of a firing squad about to be executed. She comments on how everything is sloppy, how that, some of the stormtroopers, they're not, standing with proper posture, and she's like calling out commands to the people who are going to execute her, which is pretty brilliant. And then when she's just about to get shot, she actually gets promoted to Inspector. And the reason for the delay was because of everything that happened in Scarif, some massive amount of data vault and all kinds of other things gets destroyed, that it was sort of a delay in the fact that because Thanos died, because she was the apprentice to Thanos, she would then become Inspector. Now, the Imperial officer who's commanding the firing squad says, cool, we are promoted, now let's continue. She goes, wait a minute, actually, now that I'm an Inspector, I don't have 3 strikes of demerits, I actually get 4 strikes. Which means that she doesn't have to get executed and she can walk free. But funnily enough, because the officer did not realise that she got promoted and she had 4 strikes, she also, now being an inspector, can demerit him. So she demerits that officer for him trying to kill her when she actually now has 4 strikes, and he is kind of looking really, really worried. And as she kind of leaves the area, he whispers to himself, but that's my 3rd strike. And obviously he's just an officer, so he's probably going to be next on that wall. Back to Aphra and the crew. The gentleman named the Violet Ghost kills all of the Imperials. He's the one who gets off the ship, he shoots everyone, and he's feeling really, really proud of himself, and then he turns around and the ship has gone without him. And as he's there kind of thinking, what do I do next? All of the reinforcements of the Imperial stormtroopers appear, and that is the last we see of him. So Aphra heads to Skako Minor for the Techno Union. Now, the reason she goes there is because the Techno Union's assets were actually seized by the Empire, and the guy I mentioned previously, Halio Boss, which was a Skakoan, he actually leads them all. Now, he leads them through the forest and things and says, look, it's really hard to find this place, it's a good thing you brought me and things, and then leads them straight into an Imperial trap. There are loads of stormtroopers sort of surrounding this area as the crew walk into it, and Aphra is holding that Tuka, that sort of cat thing that she's, cloned, and she throws it out and yells out, code phrase, Snugglebum Oogie Woogie, and the Tuka's eyes light up, and then suddenly the Tuka explodes. And it seems that all of the stormtroopers are down, and Rexago, the droid woman, says, customized Tuka? And Aphra goes, yeah, customized. And then the last few pages of this comic is Tolvan sort of searching through some Imperial records, trying to find out what the last thing that Thanos was actually doing when he died. And when she's trying to search for this information, error codes keep coming up. It's like, try and get this information. Oh, there's an error. You can't get that because of this order. Oh, well, what's this order? How do I look at that? You can't know what that order is. And then she's like, well, why can't I know? Sorry, I don't know what you're asking me. So it's kind of like some sort of weird loop. She does manage to delve a little bit deeper and then finds out that the last person that Thanos was actually appointed to was Darth Vader. As soon as she realizes it is Darth Vader, she's like, oh hell, and then that's where that comic ends. And as a reminder, if you want to find out what happened with Thanos on that mission specifically, read the 4th volume of the Darth Vader comics, I believe it's called End of Games, or you can listen to the Star Wars Comics in Canon episode number 29. So issue number 16. It starts with Tolvan sees Aphra and crew on some sort of like CCTV footage essentially, and sees that Aphra opens up a box that has 60 shrink frozen tukas in it. So there's weird exploding cat things, there's 60 of them shrink frozen in this one box. It's more of like a crate, but it's not that massive, it's kind of like the size of a suitcase. One Imperial seems to survive the explosion and starts to run away. Now, Aphra calls out to Tam Posler, the Milvain mercenary, bounty hunter, lawman sort of character, and says, quick, get them. And Posler has this sort of strange sense of morality. They go, well, this is just a cog in the system. The Stormtrooper's not trying to attack us or kill us, so I'm not going to attack them back. And they're just a cog in the wheel. They're not breaking any laws or anything like that, so no, I refuse to shoot them. But the trooper sort of runs and screams out, and then it's shown that they got eaten by Glast, which was that sort of cat-jaguar thing, which has got some sort of strange ability to bend light around them and hide into the shadows. And yeah, it just gets eaten by this thing. After all that sort of faffing about, they enter into Wat Tambor's vault. And it's pretty damn old, and there's loads of really cool stuff in there, but there's this strange sort of totem. It looks like a glittery space staff thing, but it's quite small and you can hold it in your hand. And immediately, Cason Bog, the headless person, tries to go up and touch it, and Aphra immediately calls out and says, nope, don't touch it. We're in some sort of archaeological site. It's shiny and it's glittery. If you touch that, that's going to cause a trap. That's just what happens every time you're in some sort of ancient place you shouldn't be in. So while they're kind of looking around trying to find the thing that 000 sent them in there for, Tolvan crashes a ship through the roof with a bunch of stormtroopers. As this happens, this gigantic droid with sort of strange worm things seems to awaken. And now this thing is called a chthonic worm god, and it is absolutely gigantic. It is probably 50 plus feet tall. It's just, imagine an absolutely colossal droid, but it has some sort of weird worm eel things coming out of its back. It almost has like a mane, but coming out of the back like of these worm things. It's quite peculiar looking. And it starts to just smash everything all around. And while Aphra is trying to get out of the way, she dives behind this sort of barricade thing and is there next to Tolvan. They immediately pull their guns on each other, and this worm god hits their guns out of the way, and then they're there just stuck behind this barricade thing together. Aphra pulls out one of her tukas and gives it to Tolvan to throw at the god. It throws at the god, it explodes after Aphra calls out that amazing catchphrase, Snugglebum Oogie Boogie. But then the smoke clears and he doesn't actually really seem to be that hurt and immediately attacks them, even more viciously than he was before. So Tolvan and Aphra manage to sort of evade this worm god thing getting them and kind of get into this strange small crawl space away from it. While that's happening, the headless person, Cason, actually gets wounded. Tam thinks that this person has been killed, so Tam Posler goes absolutely mental, leaps at this worm god thing, screaming, shooting things out of the arms and like at the kneecaps and things. They've got guns hidden everywhere, and it seems to be some sort of droid-ish being or someone who's got a lot of cybernetics and things. And then Cason says, oh no, I'm okay, I was just a little bit winded and things. And then immediately Tam's like, oh, how embarrassing, and then just hides behind the barricade and stops trying to kill things. While this is all happening, Tolvan and Aphra are about to die. The worm god is getting closer and closer to them, about to smash it. They're really close to this tight confined space, and so they start to kiss. And while this is happening, Dek Nil, the greatest droid ever, he is sort of humming things to himself and calling out things, and then he shoots a beam and it ricochets and bounces off loads of different things, and then it clips a stormtrooper who shoots a rocket into the sky, and that rocket hits a certain part of the roof, and then the whole roof collapses and crushes this worm god. When it is clear that Aphra and Tolvan are no longer in any harm, Aphra immediately tells Tolvan, quick, you need to get out of here, you need to bail before anyone sees. Then Rexa Go, the droid woman, approaches. It then cuts to the rest of the crew who just hear some sort of gunshot go off, and it turns out that Aphra killed Rexa Go just so Tolvan could escape. While the worm god was kind of going mental and things, one thing I forgot to mention was Glast, the being that can bend aura, light and stuff around it, actually bailed. They said, oh, if only I had an ability that could make me sink into the shadows and escape. Oh, wait, I can do that. And then Glast disappeared. They find the Glast outside after fleeing and things. They call him to kind of mock him a little bit, and then they say, come on, let's get on the ship. Aphra then speaks to 000 via holocommunicator and says that Wat Tambor seemed to be scared of 000, but seemed to almost worship him, but was very scared of him. But then she finds out that Wat Tambor did actually have 000's memories, and she finds out that they're in a place called Hive Base 1, which is one of the most heavily guarded bases that the Imperials have. It's a massive archiving place, not necessarily that different from Scarif, but Scarif had lots and lots of plans of everything, whereas Hive Base 1 has got a lot of weird, crazy stuff there, including memories of homicidal droids, clearly. And 000 says, well, you need to go get it. Regardless of anything, I'm your master, you have to go get it. And Aphra's just like, oh, why do I even try sometimes? And so they head off to do that. And then right at the last panel, you see that Glast maybe not all it seems to be, because it zooms in a little bit closer, and it seems that Tolvan is wearing Glast's fur. So it mentions it a little bit later in the comic, but Tolvan skinned Glast and is wearing the skin, and no one has noticed, because they've got the hood up and things, and she just keeps kind of half growling when people speak to her, which is quite terrifying. So that's where that comic ends, so issue number 17 starts up. In a Lucra Hulk class battleship, which is an old Trade Federation ship, you would have seen them in the prequel trilogy and things, is essentially a sphere in the middle of like a ring, but the ring isn't fully complete. It's almost like if you get a C, like the letter C, and then you put a dot in the sort of middle of the sea. That's kind of how it looks. In Phantom Menace, you'll remember it because Anakin Skywalker, when he's flying the ship with R2-D2 and he's wooing and all that sort of stuff, he flies up with a lot of those Naboo pilots and he destroys a ship by, basically accidentally flying inside of its own hangar, shooting its reactors, and it blows it all up. That's what a Lucra-class battleship is. So on this thing, obviously, this is decades after the Clone Wars all happened and things. So it then zooms into the inside of this Lucra-class battleship, and it has got someone flying 6 or 7 X-Wings at the same time for lots of rookies, using some sort of droid control array to basically control the astromechs aboard the X-Wings so it can help the rookies who aren't very good at flying. Now, for clarity, this person is someone called Hera Syndulla. Now, if you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels and you haven't played Star Wars Squadrons, you're not going to know who that is, and shame on you, because Rebels is amazing. And Hera Syndulla, she's a Twi'lek. Now, Twi'leks, I've mentioned them before, they're basically humans, but they've got 2 big tentacle things coming out of the back of their head. The tentacles are called Leku. Now, the most famous Twi'leks would either be Aayla Secura, who is in the prequel trilogy, she is blue-skinned. You've also got Bib Fortuna. He was Jabba the Hutt's right-hand man. In Return of the Jedi, you see him there. He's the one that Luke mind tricks, and then you see him again right at the end of the sort of post-credit scene in The Mandalorian Series 2. So, Twi'leks are humanoid, and fun fact, you can mate with a Twi'lek if you wanted to, and you'd be able to make babies with them because they can mate with humans. And Hera Syndulla is arguably one of the greatest pilots in the entire galaxy. Not necessarily Force sensitive, there's never any hint that she is, but her, just like Han Solo, are incredible pilots, and in Star Wars Rebels it goes into more detail about her and things, but this is a few years after Rebels, and she is training up a lot of almost the next generation of Rebel pilots and things. So Aphra and the crew arrive on this battleship things. They are posing as cadets who want to start in the rebellion, and they get a tour. And while they're sort of looking around and things, they question where Glast has gone. For clarity, Glast is the name of the character. This species is Defel. So when they get to a certain point, Aphra kind of mutters something to Sister Six, and then the Tuca that Aphra is carrying, the cat thing, seems to escape by accident and is running around. Aphra runs after it and manages to somehow get into the exact room that General Hera Syndulla is in, where she's sort of controlling all of those astromechs and things. Then some alarms go off saying that there's been weapons detected, and Hera Syndulla shoots the Tuca. Now, the Tuca doesn't explode massively in things. It seems that the Tucas can die normally and pop almost, but unless Aphra specifically says the codename Snugglebum Oogie Boogie, then they don't explode fully. Hera comes out and looks around and speaks to them, and she immediately can see through them and says that clearly you guys are mercenaries. So she takes them to the brig. Now, for anyone who isn't familiar, the brig is basically just like a prison. They have them on our ships, as in, ships that go on water, and they have them on ships in Star Wars that fly in space. So while the crew are just in the brig, basically mulling over in their cells, Tolvan, wearing Glast's skin, appears. Aphra is completely freaked out by it, obviously, because she's just seen someone wearing someone else's skin, essentially. And Tolvan is trying to kind of, still with the Imperial roots, trying to almost arrest Aphra, trying to get information out of Aphra. And Aphra says, look, you don't have to be the Empire's stooge. You can have your own life. There's other things to do. Then Tolvan does this big explanation on what she views as order, which was spoken to her by Thanoth. It's basically just saying that A lot of people want order because it leads to power. A lot of people feel that it makes them comfortable in things because the world is so chaotic. And other people find that because love and all of those sort of emotions and things are so chaotic and hard to control, some people are almost OCD. They're so controlling when it comes to order, just so their life feels like it has some sort of meaning and it feels like they're not so hopeless in it. And that last one with the love thing and emotions, that's kind of what's being hinted at with Tolvan there. Tolvan and Aphra then kiss once again. And then Tolvan holds a gun up to Aphra's head and says, look, you need to tell me right now, why were your files deleted by Darth Vader? Before Aphra can answer, you see some dripping water that you saw in a previous panel, and it drips onto this wire that's kind of loose, and it causes a power surge. Now the power surge only affects the sort of lower levels, which is where the brig is located, and it sets out an electric shock out of certain areas. Now because Tolvan is cybernetic, she's standing near-ish to a box that gets affected by that, and therefore she gets electrocuted. She gets electrocuted, and as she gets shocked, she shoots the blaster she's holding. It bounces off quite a few different things, and then manages to fall outside of the cell, hit a button, and then all of their cell doors open. Before anything else happens, Aphra speaks to Deck Nil and says, look, we need to get her back into this air duct that she came out of. Then it turns out that the crew didn't try and escape or anything. They just basically go to Hera and she says, well, you guys could have escaped and things and you didn't. So we're going to let you leave the ship on your own ship rather than through the airlock. And Aphra and crew try and pitch a plan to Hera to get them to break into Hive Base and get lots of Imperial information. They manage to do that, and then Aphra mutters something to Sister Six, and Case and Bog, the decraniated person, they've hid weapons in the neck crevice. So where the head's missing and there's that strange plate thing over where the neck should be, that lifts up and there's guns inside there. I don't fully understand how this thing is still alive, but it is, and it can talk. And so Sister Six grabs all of them and manages to stun everyone around her in a massive flurry of shooting. All of the rebels that were around them are now on the floor. Aphra and crew grab a stunned Hera and drag her onto the ship. And while this is happening, Tam Posler is like, what the hell's going on? And I just want to read out some sort of exchange between them and things. And just for clarity, Tam Posler and Case and Bog are both in some sort of relationship, it seems. And Bog always calls Tam Posler dear, which I find very funny. So I'm just going to read some of the dialogue and exchange between them. As Aphra saying, quick, help me get her on board. They're going to get back up on the way, talking about Hera Syndulla. And Case and Bog says, it's basically a kidnapping, dear. Could you lend a hand? And Tam Posler's like, you knew about this? And Bog is like, well, in much as they use my neck stump as a weapons cache, well, yes, a bit. And Tam Posler's like, you're a betrayer, you're a liar. I thought our plan was honourable. And Bog says, we wanted to tell you, it's just, you can be a bit pompous, dear, and you do so enjoy being in charge. The Doctor thought you might be happier this way, seeming like you're in charge and other people don't know. And Tam Posler's like, you're all vile, you're all filth, I quit. And then Aphra's like, rightio, enjoy the reinforcements, I'm retracting the ramp now, as the rebels get in. And he's like, no, wait. And he runs towards the ramp, grabs onto it, and manages to just climb aboard. Then after that, Aphra is talking to 000, or rather 000 pops up and starts to say, I'm your master, you need to listen to me. Clearly I've noticed that you've killed one of my droids, Rexer, and I'm not very happy about that. Aphra's like, look, I don't care, go away, I'll deal with you later, and turns it off. And she's thinking to herself, there are other careers I could be in. Thinking about that conversation she had with Tolvan. And then on the ship, Aphra says, I seem to have misplaced my holo communicator. Does anyone have a spare? And Tam Posler's got arms folded and he's like, why? Who are you tricking into betraying that honour now? I ought to... And Bog is like, do stop sulking, dear. And Tam's like, but she made me into a liar. And while this is happening, you just see a little thing of Tolvan is in the air ducts, just kind of woken up after obviously being shot and things, and has a holo communicator right next to her, which is obviously the one that Aphra lost. And then Aphra, she uses another communicator that she obviously borrowed off Bog to communicate with the Hive Base. And an Imperial officer says this is a restricted channel, you need to state your business immediately. And she goes, okay, well, can I speak to your boss because I think we could trade. And the last panel is Hera Syndulla with a gag on her mouth, tied up, and a nice bow on her head. A really big, bright red bow, like a present. And Aphra says, I was thinking your boss might like to do a trade. And that's where that comic ends. I want to read some of those parts out of Tam Posler and Bog because I'm not going to read out all their dialogue, but it is just really cool seeing like a little squabbling couple, even though, I mean, them both being male is obviously completely fine. Well, I presume Bog is male, the body kind of looks male-ish, but regardless of the genders, if that is even applicable in this scenario, it's just funny that someone without a head is the one telling like this bounty hunter person to stop sulking and things, and they're making such a fuss about Tam's like really honourable and all that sort of stuff, and Bog's like, come on dear, be calm. Stop being like this. And I just think the dialogue in this comic arc is some of my favourite. And as I said, I don't read out all the dialogue because I don't want to spoil it, but there are some absolute gems in here that you guys really need to check out. So the crew are on their way to the Hive Base 1, and while that's happening, Aphra is just sort of sorting out some damage that Bog had. It seems that Bog got sort of a stray shot in the neck stump, and so Aphra is just trying to fix that up and open things up. And then while people aren't looking, she seems to be inserting some sort of device and twiddling with something, and it seems to be the device that was on Rexa Go. So she's asking the couple, Bog and Posler, what they're really doing and things as some sort of distraction. And they say that Dr. Cornelius Everzan did the experiments to Bog. He's the one that decraniated them. And basically, he turns people into cyber slaves. And Bog was actually the prototype. Now, the name Dr. Cornelius Everzan may be familiar to some of you. Dr. Cornelius, he first appeared in A New Hope. Now, in A New Hope, he's the one with the strange kind of piggish nose. He's kind of human, and he goes up to Luke and he's like, I've got the death sentence in 13 systems. And Luke's like, okay. And, you know, he's trying to kind of start on Luke and things, and he kind of pushes Luke a little bit, and he's there with the Aqualish Ponda Baba. And as Dr. Cornelius is obviously trying to start on Luke, Obi-Wan pulls out his lightsaber, slices the arm off Ponda Baba, and then Cornelius kind of disappears. You do also see Cornelius and Ponda Baba on Jeddah in Rogue One. So you see them when Cassian and Jyn Erso are sort of walking through the streets. They do kind of bump into Everzan and Ponda Baba, and they kind of turn and look and kind of scowling and things, but that's all you kind of see of them. That was one of my favourite little cameos in Rogue One. But Dr. Cornelius, he shows up more later on in this series, but yeah, he basically experiments on people without their permission and does some pretty horrendous stuff. I mean, I can't even fathom how being alive without your head would work, let alone actually being alive without a head. It sounds terrifying and horrendous, so not surprised they want to get revenge on him, or as they call it, justice. So the crew and things get to Hive Base 1, and what's surrounding them is these strange acid space jellyfish things. These space jellyfish things seem to be called a scaraphyte swarm, but I can't really find any more information about them anywhere online. But yeah, giant space jellyfish that exude acid. And as that's happening, you notice that Bog and Tam are still talking and things, and they just say that they want a happy ending after they've killed Cornelius Everzan. And Aphra specifically looks at them and then looks away and has some sort of concerned look on their face. As they're getting closer to Hive Base 1, it turns out that Hera's trying to kind of big up and go like, my friends are going to find me and things like that. And Aphra's like, well, they would, but I jammed your rebel tracker. You know, the one that's kept in your rank patch. And obviously Hera's a general, so she's got some sort of patch on her arm that's clearly got some sort of tracker in there. And Aphra says, look, I'll unjam it now, then your friends can come and rescue you. But shortly after she does that, the Lucra Hulk, that big ship, appears. And it appears out of hyperspace directly into that swarm of space jellyfish. While all that sort of craziness is happening, the crew managed to sneak on board the Imperial Hive Base 1 and enter this strange frozen area full of experiments. Now, I'm going to read out Aphra's dialogue in this just to give you guys some information of what these crazy, weird experiments are in here. I mean, it's not only enough that in this story there's already someone who's decraniated and there's exploding cat things, but there's even weirder stuff, so get ready. So it starts with Hera saying that this is the heart of the Tarkin initiative. Every murderous idea the Imperials ever had comes through here. And so Aphra's running around looking at everything in awe. She's like, oh my gosh, look, it's a Wookiee with a railgun for a head. That is exquisite. And it looks terrifying, as in the Wookiee doesn't actually have a head at all. It literally has like a chain gun thing, what's called a railgun. But imagine a Wookiee body with just a gun for a head. It's terrifying. And then she says, and that's a nano-slime catapult. And those are Hutt clone troopers. And I think that's a Rathtar melded with an interrogation droid. I'm in love. So Rathtar in The Force Awakens, when Han Solo and Chewie meet Rey and Finn for the first time, and they're like, oh, we were hunting Rathars, and then the group of gangs sort of appear. And then the monsters escape, they're the Rathtars. Those giant weird ball things with loads of eyes, massive teeth and tentacles and things, that's a Rathtar. And interrogation droid, they're the ones which seem to have syringes and things on them. I believe in Empire Strikes Back you see them when they're trying to torture. I think you see them in A New Hope as well when they're trying to torture Leia and stuff, but I think you see them in the original trilogy. So it's a Rathtar melded with an interrogation droid. It's terrifying. And Hera says, this hive base is more of an archive than a factory. These are rejects. Too expensive to mass produce, too successful to purge. And Hera's like, how can you admire these obscenities? And Aphra's like, scientist means I like how more than why. And one of Aphra's comments says, and before you get on your high hover sledge, nobody's stopping you rebel dummies from inventing your own toys. Instead, it's all harking back to some fakey golden age and brainwashing farm boys. And that's referring to Luke. And Hera's like, that's not what... And Aphra says, hey, here's an idea. Let's eavesdrop on the bleeding edge innovations your progressive social revolution's embracing today, shall we? And she pulls out a communicator thing, and then you can hear what the rebellion are basically doing. Well, I say the rebellion, that Luke Crocast ship, which has got loads of rookies and inexperienced people on there, and it says what they're doing. And slightly later on in the comic, you'll get a couple more crazy weird experiment things, so get ready for them. So on this rebel comms and things, what Aphra can actually hear is that this gentleman who is like the right-hand man of Hera, it seems, basically saying that they can't launch the X-Wings, they're unresponsive, the shields are down, the outer decks are totaled, there's critical systems are really damaged and things, we don't really know what's happening, why can't anything happen? So some of the controls seem to be messed up. Then Tolvan appears and punches the guy right in the face, seemingly knocking him out, and she tries to speak to the commander of Hive Base 1, saying, this is Lieutenant Tolvan of the Expectorate, I've taken control of the Rebel Academy's control hub, and so the leader of Hive Base 1 says, this is Commander Yule, thank you for confirming all those sorts of things, now you need to self-destruct the rebel ship, and you need to remain in position and defend until detonation, so asking Tolvan to basically stay on a ship that's about to explode and die with it. Tolvan is saying yes for the Empire, looking glum, and then Aphra tweaks the communication device and then speaks to Tolvan directly. And she says, no, don't do that, you dummy. And Tolvan's like, joystick? And she's like, no, that's obviously not my real name. Anyway, why did you call the bad guys, you unbelievable nerfwit? And Tolvan's like, well, you left me a communicator, you ridiculous harpy. And Aphra's like, yeah, so we could, talk and flirt, etc. in private. And Aphra kind of looks around and her whole crew are staring at her and she's like, what? And Hera just says, it's lonely being you, isn't it? And Aphra's basically trying to convince Magna, or Tolvan, I keep calling her Tolvan, but her first name is Magna, but she's trying to convince Tolvan to not do it. She says, look, I know you want this massive career, or you want to be seen great in the Empire's eyes and things, but this is ridiculous, this is murder. And Tolvan's like, what, because of the thousands of rookies on the rebellion ship that will die? And she's like, no, I mean, you'll die. I sort of think you're nice, Tolvan thinks about it for a moment, and then Tolvan contacts Commander Yule and says, look, I'm not going to blow up the ship, I'm going to deactivate the weapons and the engines. And the commander's like, those weren't my orders. And she reads out this priority objective article 45B, basically saying capture of the rebel ship and all of the people in there and all the data is more important than blowing it all up where possible, so we should do that. And the commander agrees with her. And then Tolvan also says, also, sir, there's a unit of saboteurs aboard your base. I assume they tricked their way on board, and you should have maximum caution. And one of the commander's subordinates says, she's actually right, we've just noticed there's a mercenary ship that went on board. Obviously, while this whole craziness with that other ship that appeared, they managed to sneak aboard. So, Commander Yule says, defrost the rejects. And some of these crazy reject things, I'll describe them in a moment, but some of the pictures here look pretty terrifying. I haven't taken photos of them and put them on anywhere specifically of certain ones of these because I don't actually want to spoil them, and a lot of them out of context will kind of spoil it if people are about to check out the comics after seeing the social media posts and things. But yeah, I really recommend people check out this arc of comics because it is just excellent. Some of the art is amazing. But while it's going on, Aphra is basically grabbing Tam Posler and saying, look, you need to help us. You've got more firepower than all of us put together. All these rejects are going to kill us. You need to help. And he's like, no, these are innocent victims of experimentation. They've not broken any laws. So no, I will not do this. And she's like, well, you're going to die if you do. And he's like, well, and I'll do on a clean conscience. Can you say the same? Deck Nil, the world's greatest droid, then gets shot and collapses. And Aphra's like, please, Posler, help. We need some help. Something's going to happen. If you don't, we're all going to get killed. And Posler's like, nope, still not. While this is happening, Hera is calling out saying, give me a spare gun, please, otherwise I'm going to get killed. And Aphra's like, don't give her a gun. If you give Hera a gun, she will then shoot me as well. And Aphra says, look, I'm begging here. Don't make me use plan B. You won't like it. And Posler says, look, there's nothing you can say, woman. I'm an instrument of justice, not murder. And Aphra's like, fine. Everyone back to the ship. And she clicks a little button on that communicator thing she's been carrying around with her. And Cason Bog says, advance, advance, and then runs straight into the group of rejects and is shot to pieces. And as that happens, Tam Posler yells out a nice dramatic no, and then pulls out all of the guns. As I said, there's one coming out of the kneecap. The hand of Tam Posler lifts up, and then there's a gun coming out of the wrist. It looks like Tam Posler, although associated as a male, it seems, is almost purely cybernetic, and basically shoots absolutely everything in sight, going mental. Now, before moving on to the next bit, I just want to give a little bit more detail of some of these crazy things that you see. So, there seems to be this, it looks kind of like a Mon Calamari clone trooper. So it's a stormtrooper that seems to be this weird mutated Mon Calamari thing. Mon Calamari is the species that Admiral Akbar is. You've also got, there's like a stormtrooper that seems to have this body that looks like a giant spider and legs coming out of it. You've got beings that have got like tentacles coming out of random places and stuff. There's brains in jars everywhere doing weird things as well. There's creatures that have got these massive claw talon things, and they are all genuinely things out of a horror movie. They are terrifying to look at. I think the most terrifying one is probably, it's a stormtrooper, but the top of the helmet is cut off, so the brain is open and you can see the brain, and there's this weird needle thing connecting to the brain. And where the stormtrooper's eyes normally are, where it's just sort of the black so you can't see their eyes, you can see the eyes, and they seem to be yellow. And there's no bottom to the stormtrooper helmet, but the jaw of this being cracks down quite a lot. As I said, it's pretty terrifying, all of these weird reject things, and if there was ever going to be a Star Wars horror movie, these are the things they would need to use. So while Tam Posler is left behind going mental and seemingly killing everything, the crew get to the archive data core. Now, it's something that is so dense and has so much data, it actually has its own gravity, which is mental. And Aphra is trying to find one memory from a file, and there's not really known where it was going to be. So she's like, it's going to take me a while to find all these things. While Aphra's kind of looking, trying to scour through this unbelievable amount of data, Hera says to Sister Six, look, give me a gun. The Imperials are going to be here before long. Just give me a blaster. I'll be able to help us a bit. Tam Posler comes out of the door and is basically self-pitying quite a lot, saying, oh, Cason, my beautiful headless heart, why did you do that? Why did you go and attack the beasts? Hera starts to speak, and then Aphra immediately goes, shut up. And then Hera whispers to Aphra, Plan B her, that diagnostic device that was running tests. Clearly, maybe that wasn't doing something. And Aphra's like, fine, just give her a gun as long as she stops talking. And as soon as Hera gets the gun, she puts the gun to the back of Doctor Aphra. And Aphra just sighs and says, oh, called it. You hear some sort of gunshot noise and Hera seems to drop the gun. And then you hear a voice coming out from behind them saying, 7 hours, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. That's how long we project it would take based on the current search parameters to locate a single data point. Only a fool would try. And they say, you really didn't think this through, did you? And then it reveals the Commander Yule of this place. They look a bit like, if anyone has seen Doctor Who and Davros, which is like a guy in like halfway up to in a Dalek suit sort of thing, looks a little bit like that, but if you imagine all the way up to the head. So if anyone who hasn't seen Doctor Who, this is basically pill shape thing. There's a head sticking out of the top of it that is connected in with loads of seemingly wires and sort of things. So I presume this Commander Yule is, his whole body is now just cybernetic and he's just this head connected to it. And as he enters this area, some Death Troopers are around him. Death Troopers are the ones that were introduced in Rogue One. They're the elite stormtroopers all dressed in black, and they've got that voice modulator thing, so when they talk you can't actually really hear what they're saying. And also around him are Hutt clones. So Hutts are quite big. Now Jabba the Hutt obviously being a big slug thing that seems quite fat and not actually necessarily that scary by himself, but these ones are ones that have got cybernetic arms, they've got big guns and things, and if you had something like Gracchus the Hutt, which I've tackled in previous episodes of this show, who's like a really shredded / ripped Hutt, they will be able to kill you just by picking you up and ripping you in half. So there's 2 of those, a whole 5 or 6 Death Troopers, and they have surrounded the crew, saying, take Syndulla, kill the rest. And on that last thing where you see kill the rest, you see that Tolvan heard that, and that is where this comic ends. So here we go, the last comic of this arc, issue number 19 of Doctor Aphra's first run, remastered part 6. So, Sister Six, Aphra and Hera are all being shot at by those Imperials. Hera is using Aphra as a meat shield, so holding her in the way, so if Hera gets shot, it will actually hit Aphra first. And Tam Posler is like on the floor, traumatized, not shooting anything or doing anything really. And so Aphra uses the headset from Rexa to control the rebel ship using droid control core that she stole from the rebels. So when Hera was on the ship initially and was controlling those 7 or 8 X-Wings via the astromech, when Aphra snuck in with the Tuka and kind of seemingly distracted them and things, she actually stole the droid control core, which is why the reason that Hera's right-hand man, when he was trying to launch all the X-Wings, he couldn't do it, because Aphra had already taken it. So Aphra can now control the entirety of the rebel ship using basically her mind while wearing this headset. While this is happening, it shows that the box of Tukas that was on the ship managed to escape, and they start to run around the whole Imperial ship. So Aphra uses the rebel Lucra Hulk as basically a battering ram and tries to slam it into the Hive Base 1. She then activates shields, which are just in front of the Imperials, which stops them shooting, or rather, they try and shoot and it won't go through the shields, so they're kind of stuck. Aphra then flies X-Wings out as well. She flies basically all the X-Wings that they've got out of the Lucra Hulk station and start attacking the Imperial base. The Imperials then try and plot a firing solution through the swarm of those space jellyfish things to try and get the escaping rebel ship. And then Deck Nil awakens. Deck Nil shoots this strange beam through a swarm, which makes them act all erratic. And he accesses this terminal, much like, R2-D2 and other astromechs access little terminals, and it seems to change the code name of a lot of the Imperial launch codes. It changes the code name to Snugglebum Oogie Boogie. So as the Imperials are like, why is this code name called Snugglebum Oogie Boogie? As they say that over the comms, some of the Tukas hear it, and obviously that's the thing that makes them all blow up. So loads of areas of the Imperial ship starts to explode with all of these cats all around them, and that seemingly saves the day. It cuts to 3 hours later. Aphra manages to get 000's memories after going through that whole system, clearly showing that the commander really underestimated how clever she was. And then she just says, look, I've got this thing that I need. You rebels, you can have literally all the other data that was got in Hive Base 1, no problem, it may help you. And then it does this sort of monologue thing by Tolvan, and basically Tolvan got promoted but for her excellent work, and the Imperials of Hive Base were all blamed for the failure that happened. Sister Six tells Aphra that she's going to stay with the rebels because she wants to fight a cause and actually try and believe in something. And then Tolvan manages to escape with Aphra. Now the way she does this is Tolvan actually wears Tam Posler's gear and things, which obviously you can't see skin in that, so there's no way of differentiating. And Tam Posler says that Aphra tied up and is hiding someone in some air ducts and things, and she needs to go and help them. Aphra is like, oh, I can't believe you do that, that's so unfair, we're such a snitch and things. And while the rebels are going to try and find this person who's in the ducts, Tolvan and Aphra manage to escape. Turns out the person who was tied up in those ducts was the actual Tam Posler, who is, almost purely cybernetic it seems. It cuts to 2 days later, and Aphra and Tolvan are in a place that the comic narrative literally says is nowhere. A lot of the time it tells you where the location is, Hive Base or whatever, it literally just says nowhere. And they're in this sort of little flat apartment-y thing together. Tolvan is laying in a bed, not wearing any clothes, and Aphra's just getting up, putting on a coat and things, about to go outside. And Aphra says, no, don't wake up, Tolvan, stay in bed. But here's my true name, and she tells her name is Chelly Aphra. And then the final stretch. So Aphra returns to 000, and 000 says, look, I proved it. I proved that you're a monster. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you sacrificed a guy just to get your ship off the ground. You literally killed someone who's completely innocent, who was this other person's lover, just so you could escape and save your own skin. You did all of these things that were horrible and got so many people killed just for your own skin. That is you being a monster. And that proves that you are just like I am. While Aphra's kind of there, kind of staring wide-eyed, thinking about the things, he then says, right, cool, I've shown her the lesson, now you can deactivate her. And then just before any of 000's sort of gang cronies of Sontul start to attack Aphra, Imperials come down and shoot at Sontul. So the Imperials come down and things and basically arrest everyone, and 000 and BT-1 manage to escape by running past all the stormtroopers saying, please, no, don't shoot us, we're just droids, help, we were forced to do all these things. Aphra is confused how Tolvan managed to find her, and Tolvan says that she managed to bug her, sort of quietly. And Tolvan takes Aphra prisoner, calling her Joystick Chevron, saying, this Joystick, she's just a low-life criminal, there's no need to execute her or anything like that, just throw her in the prison. It then shows the rebels trying to access those files at the same time that 000 is trying to access the data that's got his original memories on, and both of them are showing as encrypted. And the rebels get a message saying, you need to send a certain amount of money into this untraceable account, and then the files will be unencrypted. And 000, he says to BT-1, well, what do you mean encrypted? Clearly meaning that Aphra's done the same to him as well. The comic ends with Aphra is going to be taken to a place called Akreska Jail, and Tolvan's kind of smiling at her in a sense, like really subtly so no one else can see it, and she's put onto a ship along with Deck Nil, and Aphra says, "Oh, I guess it could be worse." And that is where that comic ends. So you can find out about how the next issue and the next arc of that goes in approximately 4 weeks' time. So I'm going to give you guys a few details of what's coming up next. I want to clarify, I have a Patreon, so if you fancy supporting me on that, you can go on there. You get the Afterthoughts, which is another show I'm doing it with Megan. We watch TV series and movies and give our thoughts on it. Normally the episodes are between 8 and 15 minutes or so. I was saying 10 to 20, but one of the episodes is 8 minutes. So yeah. If you don't want to support the show, that's completely fine. But if you go over to patreon.com/genuine chit-chat, I have actually included a few things on there for free. So you can listen to our views on The Witcher Series 1. That's completely free on there. You don't have to sign up or anything. You can just listen to that. And then also Star Wars The Phantom Menace. We did about 17 odd minutes of talking about that. So you can check out that as well. So both of those are free, as well as I think I've put a photo of my tortoise on there for free as well. So if you want to just go over to Patreon, as I said, no obligation to give me any money or anything like that, but there's some free extra content over there, and if you donate anything, so as little as £2 or $3 a month, then you will get access to the Afterthoughts episodes, which at the moment are releasing once or twice a week. I'm aiming for twice a week. Me and Megan are doing a whole rewatch of Star Wars, so obviously if you're listening to this show you may want to hear mine and Megan's full thoughts on Star Wars. We do have conflicting things on a lot of the stuff, but it makes for more interesting conversation, so we're going to be releasing those, as well as other stuff. We've done Queen's Gambit, Watchmen, Witcher, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Little Miss Sunshine, obviously all the Star Wars movies. I think we're going to do a Harry Potter rewatch at some point too. So basically anytime we watch a movie or a series, we're just going to record our thoughts on that. We're watching Solo tonight as well, so we're going to be giving our thoughts on that as well. So have it a Patreon. If you feel like donating and supporting the show, it means the absolute world to me. You get some of my undying love, as well as the extra content, and there's loads of other cool stuff on there as well, including you'll get previews of the comics that I'm going to be doing for Star Wars Comics in Canon, photos of them before I put them on social media, all that sort of jazz. But anyway, aside from that, obviously I've got my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat, which I interview a different person each day. I say interview, I have a conversation with a different person. Each episode, I've had people to do a Star Wars on there, which I normally post on this feed as well. I've had loads of other people, musicians, lots of interesting individuals on there, so go check that out if you haven't already. In addition, coming up in the next few weeks, sorry, I'm scrambling now because my dinner's ready, so I'm trying to get this sorted quickly. The last things is over the coming weeks. So this week was obviously Aphra. Next week, I'm going to be doing the Age of Rebellion Heroes stuff. So obviously, weeks ago, I did the Age of Republic Villains, which was episode number 43. That's when I did, there's Vader, Jabba, Boba Fett, IG-11, Tarkin. So in the Heroes one, it's going to be Luke, Leia, Han, Lando, Yoda, Biggs Darklighter, and Porkins. So they're all going to be ones. They're all one-shot comics, so I'll give you guys background information on some of those characters as well. So that's next one, number 47. The week after that is going to be continuing the run of Star Wars comics, just the next arc in that, which I have not yet checked, so I can't give you what the preview is for that. The week after that is going to be Target Vader, which is going to be the prequel to the ongoing Bounty Hunters comics that are out at the moment. So that is it's kind of like a sequel to Han Solo Imperial Cadet, because one of the characters in that, Beirut Valance, is one of the main characters in Target Vader. Also, Dengar the Bounty Hunter features in that, and it's basically there's a bounty on Darth Vader, so loads of bounty hunters go after him. It's a pretty cool mini-series, and yeah, it serves as a sort of prequel to the Bounty Hunters comics, which are ongoing at the moment, which I will be tackling at some point in the future. Then, the week after that, we'll be back to Doctor Aphra again. I'm also almost finished the High Republic book, Light of the Jedi. I'm right at the end of that. I've been writing notes about it as I've been reading it, so once I finish that, I'm going to do a book review on that, and also give you guys an overview of the High Republic as well, for anyone who isn't already aware, because there's loads of information online, it can be a bit overwhelming. So that's what you can look forward to over the coming weeks. I have also got planned to do an episode with a gentleman who was in an episode of The Mandalorian, but I'll give more information on that once I've recorded, or if you go on Patreon, I will by the time this comes out, or maybe the day after, I'm going to release the next future guest list, which actually has the people I'm going to be having on Genuine Chit-Chat that I've either already recorded episodes with, or people that I'm planning to have episodes with who have been confirmed and things, so you can get exclusive access to find out who I'm going to be talking to over the next few weeks. So that is basically me over the next little while, guys. Make sure you check out the Star Wars Timeline YouTube channel, as I mentioned at the start. The link to that is in the description if you want to find out a lot of information, especially about the Star Wars books and things. The host Ben knows loads about Legends and stuff like that, and at some point in the future I'm planning on having him on the show as well to talk more about Legends and stuff, because I do not know that much about Star Wars Legends. Canon is the most I know about. So With all of that speedy, rambling-y stuff, I just want to say, as always, guys, thank you so much, as always, for checking out the show. It means an absolute world to me. In the description, I've got loads of the other guesting spots I've done. I was recently on an episode of Podcasts We Listen To and spoke about genuine chit-chat. Then the following week is going to be the part 2 of that chat, which is all about Star Wars, so even more Star Wars stuff if you want that as well. I've also been on loads of the shows in Comics in Motion. Check out the feed. It's where you're listening to this. Unless you're listening on YouTube on the feed of Genuine Chit-Chat, you should already know about all the amazing shows on the feed of Comics in Motion. You can listen on Spotify, all those usual places and stuff, and I just can't recommend it enough. It's so good to be a part of the Comics in Motion family because all the shows are incredible, and I barely listen to any other podcasts because I'm so busy listening to all the great content coming out of there. So once again, guys, I really, really appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate any and all patrons that have been supporting me, or anyone who even just checks out my Patreon and doesn't support. It just means a lot that not only are you listening to me talk loads, but you're considering other stuff. It just means a lot. So I want to say once again, thank you as always, guys. I will talk to you next Saturday with the Age of Rebellion Heroes episode, issues and stuff. And as always, may the Force be with you.